Jymm Hoffman.
Chandelier chain, gonna go with the S hook. These are 1/4 inch round stock, 14 inches long, and I'm not bringing them down to a very sharp point. I'm just drawing it out, give it a little bit of a taper. And bend it and make certain I have a little bit of space for this rod to stick through. So I need to open this one up a little bit. And I've challenged James to keep me in hot material. I'm used to working with a gas forge and I get into motion. Get a little bit longer heat on that. Thank you. Get some heat in there. I'm not going to fuss too much about the lineup. The main thing is to get it so this bar can go through it. All right, now once I get a nice even heat on all the parts, the trick is making certain you have, in this case, plenty of heat in the thicker part of the bar. Right now the thin is obviously very hot. And James, once you get one of those where, that's a good, I should work with that. I'm going to use, again, I got to pay attention to this vise since I haven't used it. A lot of vise will shift on me, or you. And I'm using those very expensive twisting wrenches right now.
Do you have a special supplier where you buy those?
I don't know if I can disclose my source. It's a little off center. So I'm going to straighten it in the vise with my fine adjusting tool. What I'm trying to do is visualize where the hook is going to go and get it on center. And there's one end. In this case, I like to twist vertically opposed to horizontally so I can watch what's happening. As Jill and I were getting to know each other and talking about how repetition is a good thing, you'll see here I have to do this 4 times on this project. I'm going to not fuss with this one too much. You guys are getting the concepts. I don't worry about working to perfections in demonstrations. You guys don't need to sit there and watch me fuss for 10 minutes on a little curve. It's about concepts.
Are you done yet?
Wise guys. Get a bunch of heat in there too. This is also a good warm-up for me. I got it? Got it?
Twisting wrench should put a point on it.
I couldn't hear it. I knew it was something about the manufacturer of the expensive twisting wrench.
It should have included a point on the end.
I'm going to actually purposely twist these a little bit differently so you guys can see how some are tighter, some are looser, variations on a theme. Actually, I wonder if this vise would fit in my bag. TSA would love that, wouldn't they? Sometimes you can make adjustments if the eye is a little bit off just by lifting and pulling.
Noticed you got these eyes not in line and not at right angles to each other.
I'm sorry?
I noticed you have the eyes not in line and not at right angles to each other.
That's something that I normally fuss over at home, but I want to keep moving. Now, I'll go ahead and assemble this much of the chain and pass it around. I'm going to look at my S-hooks and try to determine which one has a larger, if one hook is a little bit larger than the other, that's the hook I like to hook to the chandelier body. Let's see. That'll be the chandelier body. heat up about an inch on the very end of that, please. Historical what?
Interpretation.
Yes. A few weekends a year. And actually, it's interesting to me anyways how I couldn't come here last year when I was asked because of one of those events that I'm now doing on a regular basis. And when Scott called me, the Fort Pitt Museum had already set up their schedule. I'm like, yeah, sure, I can do it this year because you guys had a change in your schedule. And then the event coordinator about 2 months ago contacts me, says, hey, we've got a problem. Can you shift to the first weekend in August? We have to shift our date. So actually, my nephew's filling in for me, and I'm trying not to look at the phone at all this morning. They have a traveling forge that I did the ironwork for that's identical to my traveling forge. They bought it last year from Fort Ligonier so that they could get me to come down more often. So about 2 Saturdays a month I'm at the Fort Pitt Museum, and then I do travel around to other places with my traveling forge. 3 or 4 times a year is how often I take my traveling forge out.
Do you post your Jymm schedule on the website?
I don't post my traveling schedule on my website out of paranoia.
Do you make that many enemies?
That many what? If my shop was at home, I would not post it at all. But my shop's at an industrial park, and I do post on Facebook short notices of where I'm going, out of the fear of thievery.
Really?
Think about it.
Really?
Yeah, if you advertise, hey, I'm going to be here, and you got all this equipment and pictures on your website of all your shop equipment and everything, then if somebody is of like mind to steal from you, they can just watch. So I worry about that a little bit. Let's see if this pair of tongs will work better. And frequently my wife is home alone. She doesn't like to travel anymore. So this is the chandelier body. And I'm just flattening a spot out. Where did I put that other expensive tool? This is where I'm going to mount the candle holder and the wax catcher. It's going to mount on the end of this rod. There's one more step I'm going to do to it, is I'm going to bend it and upset it a little bit. Give me high heat. Here, I'll hang on to it. This is 3/8 round stock, 36 inches long. I'm going to come over to the vise, bend it 90 degrees, and upset it a little bit. I really like to use a light hammer for that sort of work in the vise. Rapid blows. Sometimes it distorts the hole, but it's not a problem. It doesn't have to be perfectly round. You just have to make certain the rivet will fit in it Should be good to go. Cool it off and repeat. See, I don't want to sound overly paranoid, but you also have to be careful. One of my other mentors that used to work at Colonial Williamsburg had a shop in the boondocks, and somebody robbed his shop of some good tools, post vise and things like that. So being in the industrial park where I am has its advantages with security, and the community atmosphere at an industrial park is nice. That you know, we kind of watch out for each other. I work strange hours, and the management likes it because I keep an eye on things and let them know if something's out of whack. Back when scrap prices were going really high, they had some problems in the park. Some people were hit with things that were left outside. This is strictly a functional piece. I used to put tulip buds on them and things like that. And most of the time people don't even look at that part of it. So I didn't say anything about it. I assume most of you are figuring out some of these things. You know, I was doing the half on, half off shoulder technique. Once I get this done, we'll pass this around while I work on the wax catchers and candle holders. Coming all the way through. Oops, sorry about that. I'm going to take as much heat as I can, because what I'm going to do now is bend this, wrap it around. Should we put this in the auction? As, you know, expensive twisting wrench?
Does that come in a left-handed version?
No, they don't make the left-handed version yet. Try to bend this in the middle. If I get the heat right, get it close, apply more heat. I'll try to leave this alone for you, and we'll play around with this. So I don't worry about trying to measure this to get exactly on center. It's not a big deal. We have heat, we can adjust it. You know, they're not perfectly lined up. That'll work. I'm going to close it up a little bit. One of the little tricks that I've learned in folding metal, especially when I'm trying to wrap pieces together and get the ends to line up or go to a particular position, is if I'm just a little shy, I put the part I want to move on the top so the anvil's not sucking the heat out of it, and when I start working it down, it'll come to me. Does that make sense? It's important at this stage to get a nice even heat. This is where My gas forges are really handy. I can get nice, even, long heats, but you know, not everything is perfect. As I keep saying to a lot of students, there is no one tool that does everything. So use what you have to its best advantage. Oh, there's the other rivets. I wondered what happened to all those rivets. I thought I was being really smart, and I packed up some of these tools last Thursday, and then Monday when I went back in the shop, I'm like, what did I do with those rivets? I forgot they were in my gloves already in the box, so I packed some extra rivets. We're going to do the top end of this. I don't know if I said it yesterday. I guess it's okay to repeat myself. I like to twist up tightly to the twisting bar because to me, it gives a really nice radius. I want to keep it relatively straight. Thank you. And I want to try to get that loop ring on center line of the shaft. Fine adjustment. Now, I'm going to bring this twist somewhere around in there. And in this case, it's a lot easier to work from the top down, cool off the top section. If you get the twist where you want it, just cool it off. With this project, it's hard to put it in the vise horizontally and grip both legs evenly. So you almost have to go vertical, and it's a little trickier to keep your twists even.
Vertical is better.
In this case, when I'm twisting other bars, I prefer to twist horizontally. I can see it better, and it's easier to pour water on a horizontal bar. The key in this case, where I am right now, is I'm trying to get both legs to the same temperature. If one is hotter than the other, it's going to wrap easier and throw off the wrap, and I want an even wrap in this case. And I got to watch to see if one of those legs is pulling out. One was. I'm trying to grip it in a way that I don't have to worry about one leg kicking out, and I don't want to mar the piece. When you're doing this, don't forget to shout. I didn't even hear a groan on that one. I guess that one really fell flat. I'm going to bring that twist down just a little bit more. One more heat. I guess we need more coffee, huh? Wrong place.
Jim, can you talk more about historical interpretation? What makes a good historical interpreter?
What about historical interpretation?
What makes a good historical interpreter? When you're working with visitors and training?
Okay. Yeah, I certainly can talk about that, and you opened the door for me so I can get up on my pulpit here. For those that didn't hear, he's asking questions about what makes a good interpreter, historical interpretation. The first thing, one of the things that I learned where I went to school, the director was really good at dealing with people in historical situations and interpretation. And he busted my chops a couple of times because I wanted to tell the visitors everything I knew. And the problem with that is you bore them to death. So the first goal for a good interpreter is, to me, at least my opinion, is to make them feel comfortable. You don't have to tell them everything you know, and many times they don't want to know everything you know. So make them feel comfortable. Not everybody can absorb all the information that you have. Make them feel comfortable. Give them a little bit of information. And if they want more, they'll ask for it. And of course, then you're going to have those folks that want to tell you that their grandfather was a blacksmith, or, you know, those really annoying questions that you have to hear 20 times an hour. When I worked at Old Fort Niagara, I was not a blacksmith there. I was the interpretive programs manager. And I had the great fortune of having friends host a conference, a museum conference, right when I started, and the museum let me go to it. And Roy Underhill was there. He was thrilled to be there because he was there to talk about talking to people. They didn't ask him to come make something. So he was really happy about that. And just a couple of little insights that I took away from that I never forgot, really kind of tied in with making people feel comfortable. And sometimes when they ask that stupid question that you've heard a million times, they don't know what else to say and it just kind of slips out, but they want to engage you. And they're actually wanting to engage you. So as often as you get those dumb questions, be patient with them and think, they have no idea somebody just asked that 5 minutes ago. That's one of the biggest challenges. And then one of the other rules is if you don't know the answer to something, tell them, I don't know. Don't make up stories. There's plenty of stories going around now, as there is. One of the pet peeve stories that most of us that have done any research or have any idea of what the logic of the people living in the period is, that awful story that people burned down their cabins when they moved west so they could take the nails.
Say it again?
People burned their cabins down when they moved west so they could take the nails with them.
That's what they always say.
It's nonsense. There's a little tiny bit of truth to it. We need longer heat. And Ken Schwartz, the current master at Colonial Williamsburg, I don't know if he did an article or was just quoted in it. The short version of it is, in the 17th century in Virginia, when you had to get permission to do anything, and you had to get what they'd called a warrant from the king, you know, a permit for even moving or living or whatever. And apparently there were some problems with people building really bad houses, or not houses, but sheds, right on the ground. And you know, after a few years, the place is rotting apart, so they would burn it and sift through for whatever. Oh, rats, I'm taking that one the wrong way. Daggone it. I want this to go that way. So there's a little tiny bit of truth to that story where Virginia did pass a law saying it was illegal to burn a building down to get the nails, that they would send somebody out to give an estimate of value of the nails and pay you for the nails. But that was in like the 1650s. You know, and I hear it as log cabins. I'm like, well, how many, you ever burn a log? How long is it going to take to burn a log cabin down, and how many nails are in it, you know? Just rip the shutters and the doors off and go. Yeah. But somebody heard this story, and it makes a good story, so they got to repeat it, you know? And, you know, I came out of the school of thought, you know, blacksmiths don't shoe horses, farriers did. Well, and then a friend of mine gives me a copy of a book that was a research article or somebody's thesis or something to draw, upset, and weld, and it was showing journals of Pennsylvania blacksmiths. And guess what? Those guys were shoeing. Some of them. So I've had to face and change my interpretation because I got a military rig. As I said yesterday, my traveling forge is a military piece of equipment. It's not a civilian item. The concept of traveling around to farm is not an 18th century concept. You know, that's a 20th century concept when people get cars and trucks, fewer horses are needing to be shod. So the guys that were enlisted in the Army that were blacksmiths normally knew how to shoe horses as well. Another friend of mine that's done did his master's thesis on blacksmith shops in Wisconsin in the early to mid 19th century, came up with theory numbers based on his research that blacksmiths, at least in that area, in a more primitive sort of area, spent about 60% of their time shoeing, 25% of their time doing repair work, and 15% of their time making new stuff. You have to do research. You have to have more information in your head than you can spit out at a time, and just be ready. And I think those sorts of numbers are probably, for those that like stats and numbers, are probably pretty true throughout most of North America. One of the things that people forget is we were primarily an agrarian society until 1900. What's that mean? Dedicated to farming. So the blacksmiths out in the country, out in the small communities, are probably shoeing animals.
Jim, do you have any information about like the social and economic status of the blacksmith back then? Were they looked upon as, you know, well, that's the guy that's the blacksmith, he's got some money? Or were they just, you know, just Joe Schmoes, you know, making a living?
Yes. I don't have really good information. That book that I was talking about in the journals lists what these guys were charging. And those numbers don't mean anything to me because I don't know what other things cost. So I don't have really good research on that. My feeling, which isn't good research, but my feeling on it is that there was a number, the blacksmiths were like any other skilled tradesman today. related to welders, machinists, tool and die makers. There's going to be different skill levels, different pay grades, depending on what you do. The workers in the shop, obviously, if they don't own the shop, if they're not the master of the shop, aren't going to make as much money as what the master does. So I don't know, to be honest.
You know, and it's an anecdotal experience, but I heard the term to strike a deal had an origin in that often if something in a smaller agrarian community in the past where you didn't have like a lawyer and all that infrastructure we have today, that often to witness...
Wow, that'd be great, wouldn't it?
That often like a pillar of the community, a couple of people looked up to would be there to witness a contract or a binding commitment. And that often it was the blacksmith, and that's where that term came from, to strike a deal.
Maybe, I don't know. It's a good story. I like it, but that's not necessarily good interpretation. How many of you have seen the book on Mousehole Forge? Written by, help me out here, Anvils in America. Postman, yes. Never rings twice, right? There's something about this special anvil in England where people get married. Apparently blacksmiths were able to act like justice of the peace and marry people. So I don't know. So much it can be a regional thing.
Jeff, do you do stuff in character, first person?
I don't do first person. If you're not familiar with that term, means it's putting on a persona like you were really 200 years, living in the period. And when I first got into the museum program, I was a big fan of first person interpretation. And what I have found, and I've changed my thoughts on that for many reasons. One, it's extremely difficult to do it well. Plymouth Plantation does first-person interpretation. So you see how I'm fussing and adjusting this as I talk. One of the things that sometimes you can do is if you have a nice curve on your anvil that you want to use for your arms, once you get one of these done, just chalk your anvil where that location is. I'm just eyeballing it right now, trying to get it even up. Normally, if I get this to sit straight that way, the ends normally come out pretty even this way. So there's different ways to achieve the same curve. There's lots of different ways. This one's not perfect. I'm not messing with it anymore. This is about concepts again. If you want to make a bunch of these, you can make a jig and bam, you're done with it. If you only want to make a couple, the other thing I might fuss with later is I'd like to change the orientation of this. But am I answering any of your questions about how to talk to people, when to talk, or whatever? Whet their appetites, give them a little information. If they want more, make a comfortable. One of the things I don't like any profession to do is use jargon that's unique to the profession. And one of my pet peeves for blacksmiths is to refer to something like this as a J-hook. A lot of visitors are, what do you mean J-hook? And it's almost like, be careful about the terms that you throw around so that the visitors don't feel intimidated.
Jim, we met Roy Underhill. He is excitable and off the
Yeah. And anytime I've asked about other people that have worked with Roy Underhill, it's like, what you see is what you get. You know, he's really that kind of personality. He's not putting things on. Although there is one area that he does put on and act a little bit. You watch him and Peter Ross together. He acts like he doesn't know anything about what Peter's working on and asks some dumb questions and get right in Peter's way, you know, when he's making stuff. And, you know, Roy knows. So that part is a little bit put on. But I look at that as a great educational tool. He's playing the part of the idiot that doesn't know anything. He's a great educator. Yeah.
Are you a real blacksmith?
No.
That's the question I always get.
Yep. And I love the T-shirts. You know, it's a dying art.
I tell people it's in remission.
All right. I think there's, did I hand you guys the extra blank that I brought with me? The candle holder. The original idea or the original design of this chandelier that my first mentor came up with this chandelier concept. He made these 3-leaf things. And I tell you what, the 3-leaf parts were just a royal pain in the butt to cut out. And I don't know if it was a hammer's blow or what other publication George Dixon was doing for a while. And he had this really elaborate 2-leaf candle holder that involved, you know, chiseling and chasing and all sorts of stuff. And I looked at it and said, wonder if I can do this really simply. And stop. I'm passing one of these around. Feel free to trace it. It works really well. These I've had plasma cut so I could get a whole bunch at one time. But if you don't have a plasma cutter, it's no big deal. All you got to do is cut an arc here, flip it over, cut it here, and you can take a half-round file and notch this in very quickly in a good vise. Doesn't take very long. And punch or drill the hole. Is that better? All right. So what I'm doing is one of those jobs that's just so vain. I'm full of them this morning. My anvils at home, the continental pattern, don't have the step, but my swedge block has a nice groove in it for doing this. Once I get this one done, I'll pass it around. And I'm going to show you another expensive tool for this project that I know I brought with me. It's a 3/4 inch round bar. Yeah, this is part 357. I drop things at home too. I'm going to let this air cool for a minute, and then I'll pass it around. Now I'm going to do the next one. Did you get it? This is where you get to use a little creativity and claim it's organic. Give me a blast there. A little more.
So it looks like you were just painting one side of it.
What do you mean? What?
Just this face and not that face, or was that not painted close enough?
I don't understand your question.
I'll look at this piece going around.
So if you decide you want to do something like this, this is actually a chipping hammer, and I sharpened the edges a little bit. I really like it having two different angles. As you see, I work one angle and I just flip it and catch the other angle. One of the little tricks on the bar, I'll show you in a minute, that you have to do, you don't have to, but it makes your life easier. But I found the 2-leaf version of this is a whole lot easier to make and a lot faster. Uses less material than the 3-leaf version. I have a hole in the center of this rod. The other side I have a little bit shallower divot. I'll use the other side probably, just so that the rivet, round-headed rivet, will sit there, because otherwise it'll want to dance around on you. You don't have to have a pair of bolt tongs or round tongs to do this, but if you do, it just makes it go a little easier, faster. Okay, the next challenge for me is I'm going to do some work with a tool that we had to make here, and I've never worked with one before. I have swedge blocks at home that have ladle molds that I sink the wax catcher into, and I'm going to try. This is a bold and new experience for me. I hope I don't blow it. I use a 3/4 inch bar for these. It's kind of an average for candles. You get hand dipped candles, they're going to vary. But the nice thing about using a reasonable sheet iron for this is you can squeeze it or open it depending on the candles. These are, I can't remember, those might be 16 gauge. Don't go too light on those. I just ground it up to smooth it up a little bit. I can't hear you. Speak up.
How'd you do that on the inside?
This, I started with a mini grinder, 4.5 inch grinder, and then I finished it with a file where the grinder wouldn't reach in. This is just a piece of pipe. And Matt welded a bar on it for me so it won't dance around the anvil, other wiggle a little bit. And when I'm forming sheet that I will be doing more of, this is what I call a rounding hammer. This is a repurposed tool. There was a closeout of a tool company, and I bought up a bunch of these, especially for when I was teaching classes. And I just domed the one end of it. And Farrier's rounding hammers, and what a lot of people are using as forging hammers today, even though they're heavier than the average Farrier's hammers, don't have a long enough reach for me for what I'm going to be doing. So what I'm going to do is try to spiral my way in and back out, make the wax catchers as clean as I can with this, and then assemble it. I like to spiral my way down, and you can get this into a spherical shape relatively easily. But anytime you get a wrinkle, you have to judge when to take the wrinkle out. The other tool I'm going to be using later on is a cylinder bottom. So if you don't have a swedge block and you want to look for those shapes, if you have access to decommissioned oxygen cylinders, there's a few other variety of type of gas cylinders that you have to have the right connections to get those as scrap.
Would that be your welding supplier or somebody else?
Yes. Welding supplier or somebody else. You just got to make some contacts.
Or go to a welding shop, they usually have old ones.
Yeah, if you can get connected with the right person in a welding shop or a supplier, and I just missed with my welding supplier right last fall. They said, yeah, we have a bunch. I said, okay, I know where they are. When I need them, I'll come and get them. When I went back to get them 6 months later, guess what? They went to scrap. They were gone. If you're really energetic, you can do the whole thing cold. I'm not that energetic. It moves a lot easier when it's hot.
What's the diameter of your line?
I think they're around 4 inches. Yeah, these are 4. And I don't worry about the hole stretching and opening up because the rivet is going to be coming through the chandelier arm and the candle holder itself. Doing a great job, James.
Yeah, not where I wanted. Thank you.
We'll make it work.
Did you cut the discs yourself, or did you order them from plasma cutters?
Plasma cutter. I do have a Beverly shear. It depends on what I'm doing. Since I was prepping to do this in a class, I taught up at New England School of Metalwork last May. So I had a whole bunch of them made, so we didn't have to worry about spending a lot of time cutting them out. When I'm at home, it just depends. I try to stockpile some of these sort of items, and if I don't have them, then I pull the Beverly out and cut them myself. Yeehaw.
Excuse me.
No worries. A little more? Try to push that a little bit. What I like about the swedge block is I can make certain they're both the same depth really easily. This doesn't have a bottom in it, so I have to kind of wing it here, eyeball it, and hope I can get them pretty close. I do make a variation on this kind of a hammer occasionally. I have, for my larger frying pans, we'll do the frying pan after I do a fireplace shovel. I have a really long hammer for when I'm doing big frying pans, and it's really unwieldy because it's so long, but it looks like an overgrown body hammer is what it looks like. And it really is. As Jill was talking in her first demo about longer face hammers and how they twist, you should try the ones that are this long. Just the slightest tweak and it's out there.
Jim, can you talk a little bit about the business end of being a blacksmith?
It stinks.
Talk about your business.
It
part.
stinks. Actually, I'm not a very good businessman. After I've been doing this for about 20 or 25 years, I was at a reenactment and said to some friends, I said, I'm starting to get, after 20 or 25 years, I'm starting to get comfortable with the craft. Now I need to work on the business end. And one friend said, yeah, you'll never be good at that. You like to work too much. It's a real balancing act. One of the things that I learned early on, I had to face reality. I had to do something I didn't want to do when I got into this, and that is production work. I had to face reality. I had to come up with some items that I could pop out and produce it pretty quickly at a competitive price, or I had to get a job. And I thought, you know, at least I'm still pounding hot metal doing some of this production work. And sometimes it gets annoying paying the bills by making several hundred tent stakes at a time, or, you know, hundreds of nails at a time. And the way I decided to deal with that is it was better than working for somebody else. Now, these are nowhere where I would like them to be perfect in any way. If I had the swedge block, it goes faster. There's lots of other ways to finish these. You can plenish the outside of them. Tom did a really beautiful job on that copper ladle. It was really nice. So I want to throw these together so you guys have ideas. This whole project I could probably do at home in the same length of time and have it nicer looking, because I'm normally not talking at home, I'm listening to music. I'm very fussy about my music. It's got to be good quality stuff. I don't like pop stuff. Anything from classical, jazz, big band, huge variety in that regards, classic rock. Those are some of the variety of stuff. I really like to listen to, I get frustrated with our local classical station because they're playing garbage at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon that puts me to sleep, and I need to pick me up. And I really like to hear some good Mozart or something like that at that time, or else get some good jazz or something just blaring in my ears with a good tempo. I'm looking for some parts. There they are. Let's see if I can get this devil together. Hopefully the next project will be a little bit more exciting for you. What am I missing? Thank you. I do this at home too. I have this problem of realizing I need to go to another work area, station, whatever you want to call it, and I'll carry a tool with me halfway, and halfway there I realize I don't need that tool, so I put it down.
The next time you want to
And I can't find where I put it because I left it halfway across. So you can adjust these as you're riveting them together. You want your post, that expensive riveting tool, to be long enough to sit on the screw of your vise. And sometimes the cross peen can reach in there better than the ball peen. So I have a little divot. Can you see that in the camera? Doesn't take much. You see the little divot it's just enough, even though these are like a truss head, not real big shape. It's just enough. These are about 3/16. Uh-oh. Houston, we have a problem. My hole isn't big enough in this one. Another adjustment time. Fine adjustment. Get through there. There we go. So if I didn't have that divot, even the truss head would want to dance around on me, especially as I put the candle holder over it. There it goes. And it may have, that is not perfectly flat right now, but I don't need to worry about it because it's going to get adjusted here. The reason why I'm a little shy at times to use my regular hammer on a small rivet like this is I have to look at how big that hole is and how I want to move the rivet head. It was actually working on some of those cannon bolts that it finally dawned on me. You don't always want to use a big heavy hammer because those garnish nails, some of the earlier ugly ones I did, I used too big of a hammer and a sledgehammer and I was moving the whole material. If you use a big hammer on a hot piece and hit it hard enough, the middle of it swells out. And in the case of riveting or other shapes, I just want to move the top material, so a lighter hammer with more rapid blows will make the difference. And you move the top, and I should have made this adjustment earlier. I'm a little out of whack here. I am a blacksmith after all. I'm not going to fuss with it. You guys get the idea. I should have twisted this a little bit. If somebody wants to do that later, you can put a torch on it and just tweak it a little. And so hopefully this gives you an idea how you can use basic elements to make something simple. And you could spend a bit more time tweaking it. I gotta fix one little detail. The finish on these, I would recommend in this case wire brushing this a little bit more. And I like to use tongue oil because it dries well, especially to the touch. This is going to be theoretically an indoor item.
What kind of oil?
Tongue oil. There's different manufacturers and brands. The only drawback to using tongue oil is that's really off. Once you open the container, it starts to set up if air hits it. That's what I needed. It was a little bit finer adjustment. All right. You guys get the idea, and you can see how you can tweak it. It's not perfect by any means. Formsby is a brand name that I get easily, and I can get it in small plastic bottles. And after I start to use it, I squeeze out the air. And that's why I like the plastic bottle in that case.
Is it Formsby?
Formsby's. F-O-R-M-B-S-Y? Is that how it is? I can't remember how it's spelled. So that's, let's build this up.
So you're about 15 minutes on this.
About 15 minutes? All right. All right.
Can we take a look at that with the camera on the table?
Sure.
Say again? Oh, you're talking.
Quick, you know.
I thought I brought more than one shovel pattern. I might not have. If anybody wants to trace this very quickly, I want to throw this in the fire now. Tom, where's Tom? Where's Matt? Tom, that piece of pipe that you were using to make the ladle mold, could you grab that for me, please? Has anybody got something they want to trace this out with? All right, you can trace it there. Dan wants it real quick too. Great. All right.
We're gonna go about till 10:10,
Okay.
because we got a late start.
Okay.
It's 9:20 now.
All right. You got 15 minutes here to switch over. All right. What I use to make shovel blades is a swedge block, one that I use for ladles. And what I'm trying to do is get set up here, work with the video crew and everybody else. So this is going to be my swedge block for the shovel. Try to get myself oriented here a little bit. I use a swedge block and an anvil. I don't use a special mold other than that. All right, you got it. Did you get a tracing?
It's coming back.
Did you get a tracing?
No, it wasn't.
Paul making a pattern.
All right, all right. Okay.
We'll have another pattern in a minute.
Time check on the video. How much time?
50 minutes.
50. How much?
50.
Oh, I thought we. All right. I guess you guys got to put up with me that Mike told me we have till about 10 after 10 before you guys are allowed to take a break. So, all right. Here's the trick and the secret to make a really nice shovel blade. You don't have to have a special pattern. I used to use patterns similar to what's hanging on the wall and wrap over it. And it would take me about an hour to get a really nice shovel blade. You'll see that you don't need that sort of pattern, which opens up a huge variety for you. You can change the size of this so easily because you're not restricted to that form. And you can still make it look really nice. You can spend more time on it than what I'm going to spend. You can get sharper corners on it if you want. But it's a tool that's going to be digging up ugly, dirty things. So it's up to you where you want to go with it. So again, if you don't have any special tools, find something, a piece of pipe or cylinder bottom, whatever, that has a depression. Yeah, you can do it in wood, but I don't like all that smoke coming up in my face. And you can see here what I can do is progressively get it deeper and tighter if I need to. Start with a larger shape, then go smaller. This is going to be very similar to making ladles and skimmers or wax catchers. If you start to get a fold or a wrinkle in it, take it out. Experience will tell you when you absolutely need to take that wrinkle out. You can let them go for a little bit, but if you let them go for too long, then it'll come back to haunt you as a crack. So you can see I am driving this area down. Stop and go to another surface. It depends on how bad the wrinkle is, whether I work it from the inside or the outside. I've got a slight wrinkle here that I'll pop out. This one, sometimes I get it by just working around it a little bit, like that, or come around to the outside. Give me a high heat. Blast it. This is, I think it's 14 gauge. Work with 14 or 16 gauge. If you get a bigger shovel, you want to go with a heavier material. At home, I use metal stands, the tripod, and I do move my anvils around the shop some, and I also have holes in the feet and actually pin them to the floor. My challenge is working in reverse. And this is where the continental pattern anvil is the sweet. It's just sweet for making shovel blades. You have this point here. It's going to fight me a little bit on this anvil. And I have to start thinking backwards and in reverse. I'm heating it up here, I'm flipping it over, which corner, so on. And I confuse myself sometimes. A little more. I'm using that bevel on the edge as a guideline for where to put that fold. Now, what I have purposely not told you yet, because it relates to frying pans. The way I figured out to make flat bottom frying pans is how I figured out how to make shovels faster. And you'll see that later. I make a dish, I dish out the center, push it, and then I come in from the backside and push it back. I found that working with sheet, it's compound physics. What's the basic rule of physics that we use all the time? For every action, until you work with sheet metal. Then it becomes compound physics.
In your shop, do you have a stake that you use to come back from the bottom?
No. No, the continental pattern anvil is all I need. No, it's with a horn. It's the pointed double horn.
What's the pattern that has no horn? You see gold antique style.
There's a real fancy name for that. Hornless. There were a lot of hornless anvils in colonial America in the 18th century. There were a lot of hornless ones throughout Europe as well. But once these anvil makers realized that it was popular to have the horns on, they started putting them on all of them just about. And I have a theory about anvils and horns and the styles and the patterns. I think were strongly influenced by farriers. And the other general working sort of smiths said, hey, that's not such a bad idea after all. Let's do that on our anvil too. Can't prove that, but that's my theory. Can you see the lines from back there? That's what I'm watching when I'm working it from the backside. As I'm watching, I fold it and I'm pushing it, it's helping develop that line. And that, I'm going to work it just a little bit more. And then I'm going to clean the top end up. But this will give you an idea of a pretty quick way to make a nice looking shovel blade without a lot of tools. Does that show up in the camera? The line here? Flat. Yeah, I have to watch it with this hammer. It's very, very flat. So if I tip it the wrong way, it's going to bite into it in the way I don't want it. Now what I'm going to do to finish this, if you have a nice radius set of vice jaws, just tighten them up and you can hammer this out here. This is a little bit larger vise and I'm going to use this piece of pipe to clean up the back. This is cupped right now from the way I've formed it so far. That's a little bit big, but we're going to use it anyways. Where'd I put it? I took an earplug out. I want to put it back in now. I'll deal with it. I don't know. I don't know. See, I still say I don't know a lot. Now, I'm going to tweak the shape just a little bit. What I like is to flare it a little bit more. You see what I just did to it?
Jim, can you set it on the anvil?
No.
And Jim, you're saying something about the secret of moving the metal. Can you point to it and repeat your secrets?
Well, the secret was cupping it and pushing it back. You know, I came in with the rounding hammer, and this started out as a dome shape. And then I pushed it back. And you're going to see a lot more of that when I'm working on a frying pan. And that's how I figured that out. All right, well, you pass that around, and we have a few minutes. I'll knock out a simple handle for that. Carry on with this theme. Yeah, when I'm working sheet metal, especially like that, I definitely like earplugs. I don't know which pocket I put it in. It might be.
The ear,
Huh?
the same as the ear.
Yeah. It's there. Oh, that's in there too. Good.
What else you got in there?
I don't know. I was like, hey.
There's a TSA.
There it is. All right. Yeah, I took an earplug out so I could hear you guys. And I really, really don't like to do that work without an ear plug in. Hotter. Right distance. Good distance. What I'm going to do is just a simple twisted handle. What is a little bit different than what I see around the shop is what, again, my first instructor did with his on a twisted handle is what I call thumb piece. I'm not going to make this real sharp. Keep it up. I'll be right back in the fire. I'm just going to bend it and then come back into the fire. So let's let her cook. How many of you have been involved in scouting as adult leaders, adult leader training? I like to use a phrase that I learned in adult leader training, use your resources, which is what I was doing to just get that quick bend. I was looking for a place to hook that. Keep it going.
Best quote from my father, the craftsman knows how to use his tools.
How many of you experienced smiths have taken the time to develop a tool you thought was going to work for something and it didn't? So you just set it off in the corner. 6 months later, you come up with another project and say, hey, I got a tool that'll do that. Yeah, I got a few of those. What I didn't mention about these expensive tools is a rule of thumb that I have that I like the way they look is, in this case, this is 3/8 bar. That's not long enough. This is 3/8 bar, so I like to use a 1/2 inch rod to twist it. The chain for the chandelier is 1/4 inch bar, so I use 3/8 for the twist. This is just be a cheap, quick and dirty fireplace handle so we can attach it to the shovel. I use that little curl. Where'd I put that? Always have your tools handy. At the bottom of the vise jaw. It's just kind of the way I like to make these. Go ahead, quick. That's good. Now again, I'm going to straighten it in the vise instead of trying to pound on it, at least the twisted part. I would like the shovel blade to come back to me on the second heat. Okay. I don't need it yet, but I'd like it in another heat or two.
Here you go.
I wasn't very good at baseball either. A little more. Get it hot. Isn't there somebody we know used to say, get it hot, hit it hard? I'm just doing a blunt sort of point because I'm going to flatten it out. I had a tong clip. Where'd I put that tong clip? There it is. Right where I left it. Imagine that. You guys don't have this problem, do you? Okay. I'm going to see if this punch will accommodate what I want it to do. Critical measurement here is what? Yeah, thank you. For the new guys, what I don't know if I talked about it yesterday on the tulip bud, I pay attention to where the shoulder is, and I start the punch on the backside in relationship to the shoulder. This part, it won't matter. Out here, it doesn't matter. But here, I'm starting with the shoulder against the anvil, and I'm punching here first on the backside so that I have no worries about that shoulder when I come through here. Because if this bar hole isn't lined up right, it's going to booger up your shoulder. So that I fuss about that. This side doesn't matter. Cool to punch. Get off there. I just want to make certain that clears. All right. Now I'm going to bend the top part first, similar to what I was doing yesterday. On this shape, I don't want a 90-degree bend because that'll just not work well for the shovel. I don't want that. I don't want this. I do want that. I don't want the handle to come in plane with the bottom of the pan. I want it to tip a little bit. So I'm going to do this in the vise. Also upsets the corner a little bit, gives you a little bit more beef there. Not that you really need it for this. I'm going to set that first angle. Oh, that's too much. Still too much. I had an uncle that would say, I keep cutting and it's still too short. Thank you. For projects like this, I do use commercially made rivets. They're a little bit softer, they're available. I know how to make rivets, but my time means something as well. What I'm working on now is two things. I want to bring this corner a little bit closer. And I can make this work. Now, there's a lot of different ways to go about the next step. Probably about as many different ways as there are smiths. Anybody have a silver pencil? I forgot to bring one. Thank you. Try to eyeball the center on this thing. I'm letting that air cool because I want to be able to make any adjustments on it. Let's see, I got a center punch around here somewhere. I normally drill these at home, so if you guys don't mind, is there a 1/4 inch drill bit easy to set up? We'll just do that really quickly. You know what? It's a little bit off center where I want it, but I can adjust it. And I don't like drilling from this side, but I mark it from this side because then I can see the mark here. So, guidelines. Now, I strongly recommend, if you're going to use the drill press to drill these, not to hang on to it with your hands. You don't necessarily have to set it up with a vise, but most of you should have a pair of these that are nearby. Hang on to it with something other than your hand. I started out in machine shop, and one of the rules is don't wear gloves around rotating objects, but in this case, it's not a bad idea to put a glove on, keep it away from the drill. You ready, Matt?
Yeah.
Or in this case, you can drill into a piece of wood, you can straddle your vise, leave your vise open a little bit. Bunch of different ways to do that. While he does that, I'll look for another rivet.
Hey, Jim,
Yo.
we have 19 minutes left.
Well, okay. We're going to be done before that. You knock the burr? Please. Thank you. Say again? I don't. There's a few tools I'd like to have in the shop that I don't have, and I will, I don't want a bigger shop, or I don't want more shop rent. This is the thing I'm looking for. I did put it in this pocket again, right? That is the normal rule. I also like to use my variation of a rounding hammer for setting rivets for a couple of reasons. One, this shape inside is also curved. That's a wee bit tight. Fine adjustment there. This rivet's a little bit big. Things are a little whopper jaw right now. It's not a perfect fit, but we're going to make this work for now. If you need to wiggle it a little bit to line it up, if you have a better eye than I on that, I don't mind. What I do when I'm riveting that I didn't say, and I thought about it as I was doing it, I try to get the rivet to expand a little bit to just snug itself up, and then I purposely hit the edges and try to roll those edges over so that they have a tendency to bite and not have any edges sticking up. It's not always perfect, but that's the goal when you're doing rivets. And I can't remember the number, but a lot of times I go 32nd over the size of the rivet. What is that?
Quarter.
Yeah, over 1/4 of an inch, so. Is it 9/32? Because then I use 25 for larger. All right, hopefully that gives you some ideas that you don't have to have a special tool for making shovel blades. You could work this edge down a little bit more, but you can do them pretty quickly that way.
Jim?
No. And actually, I don't want this to go in the auction. I'd like it to stay in the shop here. I'd like to see a little bit larger shovel blades here at the forges.
In that plane so that it hangs?
Yes, good question. It needs twisted just slightly. But with a fireplace poker, I find, I'm going to twist that a little bit. I just call it a thumb thingy. That's the technical term. Yeah. It's just another way to finish off the handle. That's the nice thing about working with round stock. So. Let's go ahead and take our break now. This is a good time. Stretch your legs. I don't want anybody falling asleep on me.
Iron in the hat.